He walked away from the role that made him a household name. Just when fans thought they knew everything about Graham Wardle, he vanished from Heartland, leaving behind not just questions, but a legacy. What really drove his decisions? What secrets lie behind the smile fans adored for over a decade? These aren't your average celebrity trivia bits. These are truths that will make you see Graham and Heartland in a completely different light. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn may just change how you remember Ty Borden forever. Before the cameras, before the ranch, before Heartland turned into one of Canada's most beloved TV dramas, Graham Wardle wasn't dreaming of fame. In fact, acting wasn't even on his radar. That's what makes his story so surprising. Unlike many actors who train for years, struggling through auditions, waiting tables, chasing scripts, Graham's entry into acting was something out of a movie. It happened by complete accident. He was just a kid, tagging along with his mother to a commercial audition in Vancouver. He wasn't even supposed to be there to audition. He had no resume, no training, no expectations. But fate has a funny way of finding people. A casting director noticed him, asked him to step in, and just like that, the camera found him. That small, unexpected moment would become the spark that lit a much bigger fire. Graham's first step into acting wasn't planned. It was more like a door the universe left slightly open, and he just happened to walk through it. What makes this fact so compelling isn't just how accidental it was, but how that single moment snowballed into a full-blown career, from commercials to guest roles, and then, of course, to the iconic role of Ty Borden. It's hard to imagine now, but if he hadn't gone to that audition with his mom, if he had stayed home that day, there might never have been a Ty and Amy. And maybe that's part of what made his portrayal of Ty so powerful. He didn't come into the industry chasing the spotlight. He didn't bring the ego or the artificial polish. What he brought was authenticity. Graham had the raw presence that made people believe in the character because, in many ways, he was just like Ty, someone who found himself thrown into unfamiliar territory and had to figure things out with quiet strength and integrity. But that accidental start also hints at something deeper about Graham. He doesn't cling to a script life hands him. He follows where it leads, even when the direction is unexpected. Just like he entered the world of acting by chance, he would later leave it on his own terms. But more on that later. For now, remember this. Behind the calm, steady presence of Ty Borden is a man who never planned to be on camera. And maybe that's why we trusted him so easily. Because he wasn't trying to be someone else. He was just being real. For over a decade, millions knew him as Ty Borden, the brooding, kind-hearted ranch hand whose journey from troubled teen to devoted husband kept Heartland fans hooked season after season. But what many viewers never realized was that the man behind the character was quietly building a second life, one that had nothing to do with acting, but everything to do with telling stories. Graham Wardle isn't just an actor. He's a filmmaker, a photographer, a writer, a true creative who thrives behind the camera just as much as he does in front of it. And for those who have only seen him as Ty, this part of his life might come as a complete surprise. Let's start with his work in film production. While most actors focus on building their on-screen presence, Graham was drawn to the world behind the scenes. He studied motion picture and production at Capilano University in Vancouver, digging into the technical side of storytelling, lighting, framing, editing, and directing. It wasn't just about learning how movies were made, it was about learning how to create something that meant something. And that's exactly what he did. Over the years, Graham has worked on several independent film projects, some as an actor, others as a producer or director. His goal? To explore stories that make people think, feel, and question. It's a side of him that fans don't often see, but one that reveals how deeply he cares about art as a tool for connection and self-reflection. But film is only one piece of the puzzle. Photography is another powerful outlet Graham has embraced. He has an eye for capturing quiet, emotional moments, sunlight drifting through trees, animals in their natural state, empty roads stretching toward the horizon. His photography isn't loud or flashy. It's honest, still, deeply personal. He often shares his work on social media, and those who follow him can see how much his photos reflect the man behind the lens. Thoughtful, observant, always searching for beauty in the ordinary. It's in those images that you can really feel who Graham is when no one's watching. No scripts, no rehearsals, just moments of real life, frozen in time. Then there's his writing. Yet another way he's opened up his inner world to others. His book, Find Your Truth, isn't a celebrity memoir filled with gossip or behind-the-scenes drama. It's a meditative, almost spiritual collection of thoughts, reflections, and photographs. Written and photographed entirely by Graham, the book invites readers to pause and ask themselves tough questions about identity, purpose, truth, and change. In a way, Find Your Truth feels like a direct window into his soul. You don't just read about Graham, you feel like he's sitting across from you, having a deep conversation, and that's what sets him apart. He doesn't perform for applause. He creates because it's how he makes sense of the world. So, why does all of this matter to Heartland fans? Because it gives new context to his departure from the show. For someone who lives and breathes creative exploration, staying in one role forever would have felt like putting up walls around his growth. Ty was a beloved character, but Graham is a storyteller of many kinds, and acting was only one of his languages. By stepping away from Heartland, he didn't turn his back on fans. He opened a new door. And if you've ever found comfort, meaning, or inspiration in his portrayal of Ty, you'll find just as much, if not more, in the other creative corners of his life. This isn't just a guy who left a TV show. This is an artist who followed his truth, even when it meant walking away from something millions loved him for. And that takes more courage than any script could ever write. It was the moment that left fans speechless. Season 14, Episode 1. Ty Borden, the heart of Heartland, the character many saw as the emotional anchor of the series, suddenly and without warning, dies. No dramatic lead-up, no long goodbye, just one quiet, devastating end. The man viewers had watched grow from a reckless teen to a devoted husband and father was gone, and with him, a piece of the show's soul. But what really happened? Why did Graham Wardle choose to leave a role that brought him fame, love, and a place in television history? The answer isn't simple, but it is deeply human. Graham has always been a private person. Even as Ty, he never leaned into the celebrity lifestyle. So, when he made the decision to walk away from Heartland, it wasn't about scandal or conflict. It was about something far more personal: growth. In interviews, Graham revealed that he began feeling a shift inside himself during the later seasons of the show. Something was pulling him in a different direction. A quiet, inner voice telling him it was time to evolve. He described it as a spiritual calling, a need to step away from what was comfortable and take a risk on something unknown. That kind of decision is never easy. For Graham, it meant letting go of a character he loved, letting go of a cast and crew he considered family. And yes, letting go of the audience that had supported him for nearly 14 years. But sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones that lead us to who we truly are. He wasn't chasing another acting job. He wasn't planning a Hollywood pivot. He was choosing something far more rare in the entertainment industry: authenticity. He wanted to live a life guided by purpose, not popularity. That meant stepping back from the screen and stepping into the unknown. What followed was a time of reflection and reinvention. Graham launched his podcast, Time Has Come, which became a space for honest conversations about growth, fear, change, and truth. It was as if he had gone from delivering lines on a set to speaking straight from the heart. He invited guests who had made bold decisions in their lives, people who had walked away from careers, relationships, and old identities to find something more real. In every episode, you can hear the same themes: listening to your gut, honoring your truth, embracing discomfort in the name of transformation. It's powerful stuff. And it's not just talk. It's exactly what Graham himself had done. Leaving Heartland wasn't just a career move, it was a soul decision. And he's never once framed it as walking away from something. Instead, he speaks of walking towards something more meaningful, more aligned with who he had become. But that doesn't mean it was painless. Graham has admitted to missing his castmates, the community, and the fans. He's talked about the emotional weight of filming Ty's final scenes, how surreal it was to say goodbye to a character that had been such a huge part of his identity. He felt the loss too. And in that shared grief between actor and audience, something rare happened. Fans didn't turn away. They leaned in. They wanted to understand. And slowly, they did. Because the truth is, even though Ty Borden died, Graham Wardle didn't disappear. He just changed direction. He evolved. And for those willing to follow him past Heartland, what they've discovered is a version of Graham that's even more inspiring than the character he played. He taught us something in that departure, something we often forget. That growth can be painful, that saying goodbye is hard, but that the courage to follow your truth, even when it breaks hearts, is one of the most beautiful acts of all. There's a side of Graham Wardle that most Heartland fans never saw on screen, a side that doesn't fit into a character arc or a script. It's not about horses or heartbreak or ranch life. It's about something deeper, quieter, something that started long before Ty Borden died and continued long after. Spirituality, not religion, not doctrine, but a personal journey of awakening. Graham's search for truth, meaning, and purpose didn't begin with leaving Heartland. It began with the quiet voice inside him that asked, "Is this all there is?" And that question became the compass for everything that came next. He's spoken openly about feeling a pull, a kind of inner knowing, that told him it was time to leave the show. At first, he ignored it. After all, why walk away from success? From stability? From a role fans adored? But the more he tried to silence that voice, the louder it got. That's the thing about spiritual callings. They don't care about contracts or comfort zones. They care about truth. And so, Graham listened. He made the choice few people in his position would dare to make. He stepped away from everything familiar, not because he had a plan, but because he had faith in something bigger than a career, in growth, in change, in what he calls the unfolding. That's what his podcast Time Has Come is really about. It's not just celebrity interviews or life advice. It's a living journal of his own spiritual journey. In each episode, Graham dives into the kind of conversations most people are afraid to have, about pain, identity, ego, transformation, and the courage it takes to break free from the life others expect of you. He talks about shadow work, about surrender, about the dark nights of the soul that force you to question everything. And through it all, he remains grounded, humble, honest. He doesn't pretend to have the answers. What he offers instead is presence, a willingness to ask hard questions and sit with uncomfortable truths. That's what makes his voice so rare in a world obsessed with quick fixes and highlight reels. Graham isn't interested in pretending everything's fine. He's more interested in what happens when it's not, and who we become when we stop running from that. What's even more remarkable is how this spiritual side has always been there, quietly woven into his work. Look back at Ty Borden's character, the way he wrestled with loss, with identity, with finding peace in chaos. It wasn't just good acting, it was personal. Graham brought his own search for meaning into the role, whether we realized it or not. And now, he's bringing that same energy into everything he does. His photography, his writing, his podcast, even his interactions with fans. It's all rooted in the same intention, to live with honesty and to help others do the same. For Graham, success isn't measured in followers or film credits. It's measured in presence, in alignment, in whether or not he's living a life that feels real, even if it's risky. This version of him, the seeker, the guide, the question asker, isn't just interesting, it's powerful, because it shows us that even those we put on pedestals struggle to find their place. It reminds us that the search for meaning isn't reserved for monks or gurus. It can be found in actors, in ranch hands, in podcasts, in you. So yes, Graham Wardle left Heartland, but what he walked into was something far more lasting, a path of purpose, a life of depth. And through his voice, his art, and his questions, he invites the rest of us to ask, what truth am I avoiding? And what would happen if I finally followed it? It's been years since Ty Borden wrote across the screen, since he whispered something soft to Amy, or smiled with that quiet, wounded charm that made millions fall in love with him. But even now, long after his character's final scene, Graham Wardle's presence still lingers, not just in the hearts of Heartland fans, but in the energy of the show itself. And that's no accident, because Graham didn't just play a character, he left a legacy. What makes that legacy so powerful is how unexpectedly human it is. In a world where actors often seem untouchable, Graham remained someone people could relate to. He was never flashy, never distant. Fans saw themselves in his journey. They watched him grow, make mistakes, love deeply, and face loss. And when he chose to leave Heartland, they didn't just lose a character, They lost a reflection of their own lives. But something remarkable happened after he left. Instead of fading away, the connection between Graham and his fans deepened. People started looking into who he really was. They discovered his photography, haunting images of wild landscapes and quiet places. They picked up his book, Find Your Truth, and realized it wasn't just a collection of words. It was a roadmap to living more intentionally. They listened to his podcast and heard a man wrestling with the same questions so many of us carry silently. Who am I really? What's worth holding on to? What am I afraid to let go of? This wasn't a celebrity trying to stay relevant. This was a person trying to stay real. And his vulnerability, his willingness to show up without a script, created a different kind of bond, one that doesn't fade when the credits roll. In fact, that's part of what makes Graham's story so unique. Most actors are remembered for what they did on screen. Graham is remembered for how he made people feel off screen, for how he showed that it's okay to change, okay to step away, okay to not have all the answers. His departure from Heartland wasn't a disappearance. It was a transformation. And fans followed him not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Even the show itself, in its later seasons, continues to echo his impact. Amy's grief, the ranch's empty spaces, the way life moves on even when someone is missing, it all feels like a tribute to Ty. But it's also a tribute to Graham, to the space he left, and to what he represented: love, growth, stillness, and strength. That's why his story matters. Not just because he was a fan favorite, or because he made Heartland what it was, but because he proved that walking away doesn't have to mean losing everything. Sometimes it's how we find what really matters. And that's the final surprising truth about Graham Wardle. He didn't stay in the spotlight to be seen. He stepped into the shadows to be true. And in doing so, he gave his fans something even more valuable than Ty Borden's story. He gave them permission to evolve, to change direction, to follow their own truth, even when it hurts, even when it's hard. So maybe that's why he still captivates us. Because deep down, we're all trying to do what he did. Be brave enough to leave behind the things that no longer serve us and walk toward the life that's waiting. One quiet step at a time. If you've made it this far, now you know, Graham Wardle isn't just an actor who played Ty Borden. He's a storyteller, a seeker, and a reminder that the most important journey we'll ever take is the one inward. When an actor steps away from a long-running series, it's usually the end of a chapter. For some, it's even the end of their visibility in the industry. But for Graham Wardle, stepping away from Heartland wasn't the end. It was a quiet beginning. What's most surprising isn't just the depth of his personal journey, it's how deeply his choice impacted his fans. Not just for a week, not for a season, but continuously. People didn't just watch Heartland, they grew up with it. They leaned on it during tough times. For many, the show became more than entertainment. It was comfort. And at the center of that comfort was Ty Borden. He represented stability, redemption, love, and hope. When Graham walked away from that role, it shook people, not because they felt abandoned, but because they realized something important. Even those we admire most are allowed to grow. That realization changed fans, and it continues to. After his departure, thousands of people began exploring his work beyond the screen. Some found his photography and were moved by the raw emotion in his shots. Sunsets over lonely roads, still lakes reflecting cloudy skies, faces lit by soft, natural light. They saw in his images something they rarely saw in celebrity culture: presence, stillness, honesty. Others found his podcast, Time Has Come, and found themselves returning week after week, not because of flashy guests or viral content, but because they felt understood. Graham wasn't preaching. He wasn't pretending to have all the answers. He was asking real questions. What does it mean to trust your intuition? How do we grieve the versions of ourselves we've outgrown? Can we live a meaningful life without knowing exactly where it's headed? These questions, delivered in his calm, grounded voice, did something surprising. They gave people permission to slow down, to reflect, to rethink their own choices, and most importantly, to understand that leaving something behind doesn't make you lost. Sometimes it makes you found. And this is where Graham's influence reaches its most unexpected height. He didn't just change the show, he changed the audience. fans began sharing their own stories. Stories of transition, of heartbreak, of choosing uncertain paths in the name of truth. In online forums, comment sections, podcast reviews, and even handwritten letters, they thanked him. Not just for playing Ty, but for reminding them that real courage happens when no one's watching. That bravery isn't always about running into danger, it's about walking away from what no longer feels right, even when the world doesn't understand. And even more impressively, he listens. Graham is known for responding to fans, reading their messages, and genuinely engaging with the people who follow him. Not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. Because he doesn't see himself as someone above them. He sees himself among them. This level of humility, especially in someone who's achieved so much success, is part of what keeps his legacy alive. He doesn't chase relevance. He doesn't market himself for attention. He simply shows up in his work, in his words, in his silence, with integrity. And that's rare. Even the Heartland cast and crew have acknowledged his lasting influence. In interviews and behind-the-scenes footage, you'll often hear them speak of him not just as a colleague, but as family. His presence on set was known for being steady, respectful, and deeply thoughtful. He brought warmth to the role, but also to the people around him. And that energy, that calm and grounded nature, left an imprint that the show still carries today. So where does that leave Heartland without Ty Borden? Surprisingly, the show continues to evolve. It explores grief, healing, and growth in a way that honors Ty's memory without trying to replace him. It lets Amy navigate life after loss in a way that's honest, sometimes painful, but ultimately empowering. And behind all of that is Graham's influence. Silent, but present. It's in the way the show now gives more room for emotional nuance. It's in the slower scenes, the moments of reflection, the way the characters are allowed to just be. His departure forced the show to grow up, and in doing so, it became even more real. Because that's what grief does. It doesn't end stories. It deepens them. And so, even if Graham never returns to the screen, even if Ty remains a memory, the impact remains. Not just on the storyline, but on the audience who saw a man walk away from everything safe and familiar and choose authenticity over applause. If this video moved you, stay with us. Because Graham Wardle's story isn't about endings. It's about courage, creativity, and choosing the road less traveled. And maybe, just maybe, it's about helping the rest of us do the same. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. What part of Graham's journey inspired you the most? We'd love to hear your story too. For more like this, subscribe to our channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that matters. We'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay true.